Go home, bro. The glass lobby of Astoria Veritas Tower, Pearl District, Portland, 8:53 on a Monday morning in November. 58 bodyguard candidates stood in 2 long rows along the polished floor, all of them in black. The revolving door turned. Reed Callahan walked in wrinkled pale blue shirt, canvas bag over one shoulder. Behind him, Claire, 8 years old, clutching an old brass compass against her chest. Laughter spread. Baxter Cale, former Pacific Northwest MMA champion, 258 pounds, smirked. Bro, go home. Hunter Voss folded his arms, satisfied. Reed did not answer. He crouched, adjusted the strap of his daughter's backpack, and said quietly, "Sit here. Dad will be quick." Claire nodded. 42 seconds later, Baxter Cale lay face down on the mat. Nobody was laughing. On the 41st floor, Sloan Whitaker dropped her teacup. 72 hours earlier, the letter had come from Behavioral Health Portland. Claire's trauma program would terminate in 30 days if the outstanding balance of $6,200 was not paid that month. The envelope was thin and had the particular weight of a thing mailed without malice by a billing office that did not know the letter it was sending. The watch shop on Northwest Davis Street did not earn that kind of margin. Reed had not touched his military retirement account since 2019, and even if he drained it entirely, it would only cover 9 months of the program. 9 months was not enough. Claire's therapist had been clear. The work was long work. It did not shorten for budget reasons. That Sunday night, after Claire was asleep, Reed sat at the bench beside a 1952 Patek Philippe waiting for a new mainspring. His phone buzzed. Astoria Veritas, recruiting email. Salary. Benefits. Preference for former special operations. He had deleted 3 similar emails that year already. He opened the resume he had last sent out in 2019. He read it for a minute the way a man reads his own obituary. Master Sergeant, 1st Marine Raider Battalion. Intelligence Support Activity Detached. Syria, 2017. Navy Cross. He closed the file. Then, after sitting a long time, he forwarded it. Monday morning, Claire insisted on coming along. "I do not like staying at Mrs. Henley's for too long. Where you go, I go. Mom and Dad said so." Reed did not argue. He had learned not to argue with Claire whenever she invoked Mom and Dad said so. It was a code she used for the parts of her that still belonged to a household of 3. At Astoria Veritas, Hunter Voss stopped him at the threshold of the main hall. "This is not a place to drop your kid off, friend." Reed looked at him without heat. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment. My name is on the list." Hunter checked the tablet. Something moved across his face and was put away quickly. The name Reed Callahan sat at the very top of the candidate roster. Added Sunday afternoon, signed personally by Sloan Whitaker, CEO. Hunter did not offer an explanation. He waved a hand. An assistant led Claire to a small waiting area with a low table and a stack of coloring books that did not belong to anyone in particular. She set the compass down carefully, took out her notebook, and began to draw a schematic of the ceiling ventilation system that nobody had asked for. The lines were precise. The rectangles were square. Reed walked into the main hall. He placed on the interview table a single sheet of white paper. 1 phone number, 1 line. "Call this number for verification." The interviewer paused. Hunter exhaled through his nose the way a man exhales when he is performing patience for an audience. Response assessment. 90-second video of a crowded venue. Baxter Cale named 4 of the 6 marked threat positions, clean and confident. The room gave him quiet approval. Reed watched the video once. 6 marked positions, 2 unmarked. Camera blind angle behind the 3rd column on the left. Approach vector approximately 4 feet. The man in the olive jacket has shifted his hand position 3 times. He is carrying something he has not decided whether to use. 2 seconds of silence. Hunter smiled. Lucky guess. Reed sat back down without reply. On the 41st floor, Sloan had watched it all on the monitor above her desk. Maddie Orsini stood beside her, her hands folded in front. "You are certain this is the man?" Sloan asked quietly. Maddie answered, "Your father was certain. I am only delivering the message." The physical round bracket went up on the wall of the main hall. Hunter had arranged it himself that morning. Reed Callahan versus Baxter Cale. Most of the room understood the intent, immediately removed the anomaly early, before it became inconvenient. A few men smiled. A few pulled out phones. Baxter stood, rolled his neck, stretched his right arm across his body. There was no cruelty in him. He simply did not see this as a contest. 4 matches that morning, each under 40 seconds. Same sequence every time. Close the distance. Establish grip. Control weight. Reed bent down to retie the lace on his left shoe. Claire had moved to the doorway of the waiting area and was standing very still, watching through the gap. On the 41st floor, Sloane stood up from her chair and straightened her jacket. Maddie asked, "You are going down," Sloane said. "The screen is too small," and stepped into the corridor. When she appeared at the door of the main hall, the energy shifted. Spines straightened. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Hunter moved toward her quickly. "Ma'am, there is no need, continue," she said, looking past him. She did not look at Baxter. She had already assessed him. She looked at Reed, who was finishing his lace. In 12 years as the youngest CEO in Astoria Veritas history, Sloane Whitaker had never met a person who appeared entirely indifferent to whether she was watching. That single fact held her attention more than anything else she had seen all morning. The whistle blew. Baxter came in, immediately left hook. Textbook shoulder clinch. Reed shifted the heel of his left foot 6 degrees. Baxter's grip closed on air. Baxter came in a second time. A third. Reed gave ground in small, precise increments, not evasion, but reading. His eyes did not track Baxter's hands. His eyes were still. He was reading something deeper than motion, some sequence of information that lived below the level of individual movement. At the 17th second, something in Reed's face contracted. He had seen what he needed. At the 18th second, Reed stepped in rather than back. One hand locked Baxter's elbow at the joint. The other made a small adjustment to his center of gravity. It was not a throw in the traditional sense. It was a redirection so precise that Baxter's own momentum became the mechanism of his descent. Total time, 42 seconds. Baxter Cale, face down on the mat, did not move. Reed released the hold, stepped back, and gave a small, apologetic tilt of his head. His breathing was unchanged. The phones recording in the room had not been turned off. Nobody had thought to stop them. Claire crossed the floor to her father, backpack on one shoulder, compass against her chest. "Dad, are you done?" Reed knelt to her eye level. "All done. Hot chocolate." Claire nodded seriously. "With marshmallows." "With marshmallows." As Reed took Claire's hand and walked toward the exit, Sloane signaled Maddie, "Bring him to 41. In her office, she slid a folder across the desk. The cover read DOD/ISA/Marsoc Callahan, RJ 12 pages. This sat on my father's desk in a safe deposit box for 18 months. My father died in March. He left it for me with a note. "You will need this man. Did you know my father? Mr. Callahan." Reed opened the folder. He read his own service record, page by page, the way a person reads a document about someone else they used to know. Then, quietly, "My grandfather repaired watches for your father starting in 1961. Your father came to my shop once, 6 months before my wife was killed. He did not say anything. He drank tea. Then he left." Sloane sat down very slowly. "Do you know what kind of trouble I am in?" she asked. Reed answered, "Not yet, but if you want my help, I need to read every contract you have signed in the last 2 years, especially the one with Strand Capital." Sloane narrowed her eyes. "How do you know that name?" Reed said, "I do not, but your father kept my file in a safe for 18 months, which means he knew someone was coming for you, and that someone was large enough that he did not trust a single name in his own company." Sloane looked at him for a long time. She had expected to be judging. She was being read. Then she pushed another contract across the desk. The Strand Agreement. Start here. 7 days into the job, Reed had signed the contract, $210,000 a year, Tier A family coverage. No negotiation. He gave the number he had calculated to be the fair price for the work. Sloane signed it without renegotiating, which was not how she normally signed anything. He worked like a shadow. He stood behind Sloane at exactly 1 step, never 2, never beside her. She noticed it on the second day and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. The position was correct. It was how it should be done. He knew which doors had slow hinges before reaching them. He read a conference room before she walked in, not conspicuously, only a half-second pause at the threshold, a single sweep of the eyes. He knew when someone in a room was carrying tension before the conversation revealed it. In 7 years of running Astoria Veritas, Sloane had never had a security detail whose presence she forgot about. She had spent those years learning how to move around her guards. She did not do that with Reed. He did not look at her the way people generally looked at her, either. The low voltage of a person standing near a CEO, the slight forward lean of the body toward power, was absent in him. He oriented toward her because she was his responsibility, not because she was important. It took Sloane 3 days to name the difference, and once she had named it, she could not stop noticing it. On the 5th day, Claire's daycare called. Mrs. Henley, the elderly neighbor who volunteered as afternoon sitter, had a family emergency and could not take her for the afternoon. Reed came to Sloane's office doorway and spoke briefly to Maddie, framing it as a logistical complication that required his absence for 2 hours. Sloane called through the open door, "Bring her up here." Maddie paused. Sloane had already turned back to her screen. 45 minutes later, Claire walked onto the 41st floor with her backpack and her pencils. She greeted Sloane with the small, serious nod of a child who took introductions seriously. She set the compass on the corner of the waiting room sofa, sat down, and began to draw. At 4:30, Claire came to the open door of Sloane's office and held out a folded piece of paper. It was not a drawing of a person. It was a schematic. Rectangles connected by arrows, labeled door, camera, fire, stair, blind angle. A small circle with a question mark at the center of the diagram. Sloane looked at it for a long time. "What is the circle, Claire?" Claire said. "It is where I do not understand. There is a vent that does not connect to the rest of the system. I cannot tell where it goes." Sloane folded the paper carefully and placed it in the top left drawer of her desk. She did not put it in the recycling basket under the desk, which is where paper without operational relevance was filed. That evening, an email arrived from an anonymous address. 9 words. "You are being sold, and you do not know it." Attached was a screenshot of a clause from Section 9 of the Strand contract. Sloane called her lead contract attorney. He did not pick up. His assistant called back 40 minutes later with an explanation that sounded carefully prepared. Reed was standing by the window. He had been there since she ended the call. Sloane said, "Do you know anything about this?" Reed said, "Not enough yet, but I am looking." He paused. "The diagram Claire drew it is accurate. There is a vent that does not match the building's main system. If someone were preparing to enter the server room, that is the route they would take." Thursday evening. Sloane had dinner with Carver Strand, her stepfather, CEO of Strand Capital, at the Ellsworth Room on the 38th floor of the Meridian Hotel. Strand was 58, silver hair cut short. The lighting of the room had been designed to make powerful people look comfortable, and it did its work on him. He stood when Sloane arrived, expressed genuine-sounding pleasure, ordered a bottle of wine from a list that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The smile of a man who had learned that appearing harmless was a more effective strategy than appearing strong. Reed drove Sloane there and stood 4 meters away for the duration of the meal. Strand looked at Reed exactly once, the look of a man who had completed an assessment and found it worth noting. Then he did not look again, which was itself a decision. The conversation moved through its early phases with the theatrical quality of 2 skilled negotiators who had agreed to enjoy the performance of the thing. Strand spoke about family partnership, strategic alignment. He used words like synergy and legacy without embarrassment. He named 3 of Sloane's initiatives by heart to show that he had done his homework. Then, over the main course, he said the words as though they were weightless. The Q4 benchmarks, of course, will be the natural moment of alignment given Section 9. Sloane set her fork down with the careful control of someone who would not permit her hands to express what her face would not. Something inside her dropped and kept dropping. Of course, Carver. Strand smiled with the warmth of a man who believed he had already won. "I am not an adversary, Sloane. I am simply pragmatic. Your father and I worked for many years. I only want to complete what he began." "I appreciate the clarity, Carver." In the car on the way back, The city moved past the window in streaks of white and amber. Reed drove. 20 minutes passed in silence. Then Sloan said, "Did you read the contract before you took this job?" Reed said, "The first morning, Section 9, Section 14, Appendix C." A silence. "Why did you read my contract?" "I cannot protect you if I do not understand the ground you are standing on." She watched his face in the rearview mirror. His jaw had a line of tension in it that had not been there during dinner, which meant he had been performing calm at that table the same way she had, and she was only noticing now. The recognition settled into her chest and stayed there. 3 nights later, Reed found an 11-minute gap in the Astoria Veritas basement parking security log. No error code, no explanation. Just the gap, which was technically impossible under the current system unless someone with enough understanding of the system had created it deliberately. He copied the log, closed the original, and sat for a long time in the second-floor security office. 4 years in the intelligence support activity had taught him what the early architecture of an internal betrayal looked like. He was looking at it now. Hunter Voss had access to the camera system. Hunter Voss had a phone number in his contacts that did not belong to Astoria Veritas. Hunter Voss had been in the building during those 11 minutes. Reed closed the laptop and began to build a different kind of record. Claire's cough started around 3 in the afternoon on Friday. Not alarming, but by 6 she had a low fever and the particular determined expression of a child managing her discomfort with slightly too much restraint. At 6:15, Reed came to Sloane's doorway and asked, briefly, if he could leave at 7 instead of 8. Sloane stood up and got her coat. He looked at her. "You do not need to, I know," she said. Reed's apartment was on the 3rd floor of an older brick building on Northwest 13th Avenue, 4 minutes on foot from the watch shop. Clean, small, almost nothing in it was not functional, except one corner of the living room, which belonged entirely to Claire, drawings layered on the wall in an overlapping gallery, books stacked by height in bright columns, a low basket of stuffed animals arranged according to some internal logic only Claire could explain. Sloane sat on the edge of Claire's bed while Reed made soup in the kitchen. Claire looked up at her from the pillow with the evaluative calm of an 8-year-old who was assessing whether this visitor was going to say something useful. "Do you have a mom?" "Yes." "Do you see her often?" "My mother is busy. We do not see each other much." Claire nodded seriously. "My dad is busy too, but he is always here." Later, after Claire was asleep and the soup bowls were rinsed, they sat at the kitchen table with 2 cups of tea. The building made its evening sounds, the radiator ticking, the upstairs neighbor's television at low volume, rain starting against the window. The city pressed its light against the glass. Sloane asked about Eleanor. Reed was quiet long enough that she wondered if she had asked something she should not have. Then he turned the cup once in his hands. Eleanor was an investigative reporter at Willamette Week. She was working on a 6-month series. She never gave me the details because of professional principle. The night of June 27, 2023, I was out of Portland on my last job with the unit. Someone broke into the house. She was stabbed 4 times. I got home 11 minutes late. 11 minutes. That is the number I cannot stop thinking about. The police called it a random burglary. I did not believe them, but I had no evidence. I left the military 60 days later. I did not go back. He said all of it directly, without ornament, without waiting for a specific response. Sloane did not offer condolences in the standard arrangement of words. She sat with it for a moment. Then she asked, "Is that why you always stand exactly 1 step back?" Reed looked at her. For the first time since she had known him, the expression on his face was not the expression of a person doing a job. It was something older than that and less defended. He did not answer, but he did not look away. The next morning, Sloane called a private investigator, one nobody at Astoria Veritas knew about, retained separately from her legal team. She gave him the phone number from the single sheet of white paper Reed had placed on the interview desk a week earlier. The result came back within hours. The number belonged to a retired brigadier general named Samuel Holt, who had commanded Reed's ISA unit for the last 2 years of his service. Holt was the one who had sent the 12-page dossier to her father. Holt had known about Strand. Holt had known longer than she had. Sloane read the name in the report, leaned back in her chair, and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. She said to herself, in the empty office, the only sentence that felt accurate. I have been surrounded, and I did not see it. Monday. Claire came up to the 41st floor after school. She sat in her usual corner on the waiting room sofa. She drew a new diagram, not the vent this time. Overlapping circles, company names inside them. Strand Capital, Kestrel Arts Holdings, Pearl Museum Trust, Astoria Veritas. A red line ran from Strand Capital to Astoria Veritas through the two intermediaries in between. Sloane came over, leaned down, and studied the page. Where did you get these names, Claire? Claire opened her backpack. She took out the brass compass. She turned it over. 3 letters engraved on the back. E period, K period, W period. Mom carved it when I was 5, Claire said. She told me it was someone's initials, someone she was helping. She said if Dad ever found it one day, he would understand. Reed walked over from the window and took the compass. He looked at the 3 letters for a long time. E.K.W. Everett Kendall Whitaker, Sloane's father. Reed crouched down next to Claire. Did Mom say why she carved it? Claire said, Mom said Miss Sloane's father was a good man who was stuck. Mom was helping him. Mom said, if one day I do not come home, you give this to Dad. He will know what to do. I forgot. I am sorry. Claire said the last sentence in the voice of a child who had been quietly blaming herself for 3 years. Reed held her. He stayed still for a long time. Then he said, you do not have to be sorry. You were doing your part. You waited for the right moment. He turned to Sloane. Eleanor was investigating Strand Capital for 6 months before she died. I did not know. She did not tell me because of professional principle, but your father knew, and he did not leave my file with you because I am a bodyguard. He left it because I am the only person with a personal reason to go all the way to the end of what Strand is doing. Sloane exhaled. A small tremor ran through the line of her shoulders. Your wife was killed because of Strand, Reed said. I need more evidence before I say that sentence out loud. But yes, I think so. That night, after Claire had been put to sleep in the guest room at Sloane's home, nobody was going back to Reed's apartment tonight. The address was too exposed. Reed and Sloane sat on the deck of her 14th floor apartment in West Hills, looking out over Portland. The river threaded silver through the dark. The city made its small sounds beneath them. Sloane said, my father knew your wife was going to die, didn't he? He could not stop it in time. Reed said, he tried, the way he knew how. He left us for each other. That was the last thing he could do. 15 centimeters between the 2 chairs. Nobody closed the gap. Nobody needed to. Matty Orsini called Sloane at 11:47. There is an emergency shareholder meeting, Strand called it. Wednesday morning. He wants an early vote on Section 9, before Q4. Reed looked at his watch. We have 34 hours, Monday night into Tuesday morning. Reed did not sleep. He rebuilt the full picture-modified camera data, internal emails recovered from a backup server that Hunter Voss had forgotten still retained 3 months of archives, wire transfers between Strand Capital and 2 shell companies Hunter controlled through a cousin in Beaverton. The forensic pattern was old. Reed had seen it before, in a different uniform, in a different country. Betrayal, whether domestic or foreign, left the same type of fingerprints. Kestrel Arts Holdings, the vehicle Strand used to launder money through artworks, was exactly what Eleanor had been investigating. The encrypted drive in Everett's safe contained the final manuscript of her series, backed up by Everett after a short meeting with her that Reed had never known about. Sloane opened the drive with the code Everett had left in a handwritten letter, Reed's and Eleanor's wedding date. A date Everett had never been given, and must have obtained some other way. Reed's jaw tightened when he read the number out loud, and for a long minute he sat without speaking, looking at a painting on Sloane's wall that he had not previously registered. Eleanor's manuscript. 94 pages. Real names, account numbers, photographs, scanned receipts, bank routing trails. Strand had moved more than $180 million through museums in 5 years. The funds were coming in through a Zurich intermediary and leaving as clean charitable donations to 3 mid-sized American institutions, 2 of which Strand sat on the boards of. Tuesday afternoon, Nikhil Ranganathan, a forensic attorney from Seattle whom Sloane had reached through the MIT alumni network, flew down to Portland on 2 hours' notice. 4 hours of uninterrupted work at a borrowed conference room 2 blocks from the tower. The file was complete. Section 9 could be voided under Clause 22B, documented partner fraud. Meanwhile, Reed found something else. 2 motion sensors on the 38th floor had been overridden for 6 seconds on Sunday night. Somebody had surveyed the route to the server room, and 3 external visitors had been registered under the name of a consulting firm that did not appear in Astoria Veritas's vendor database, scheduled for a Wednesday morning tour, precisely while the shareholder meeting was running 2 floors above. Strand did not only want Section 9. He wanted the client data for all 47 community banks sitting in the 38th floor server room. In his hands, during the hours before a forced leadership transition, it was worth more than the merger itself. Tuesday night, Reed came to Sloane's apartment. Claire was drawing at the kitchen table. Sloane was on the phone with legal. Reed sat down on the floor next to Claire. "I need you to do something for me. Tomorrow, Maddie is going to take you somewhere special. Not school. A very safe place. I will pick you up at 2 in the afternoon." Claire looked up from her drawing. "Are you doing something dangerous?" "Dad is doing what he has to do, like with Mom." Reed was quiet for a beat. "Not like with Mom. This time, Dad is coming home on time." Wednesday morning, 7:40. Maddie picked Claire up and drove her to her sister's house in Lake Oswego, entirely off the radar. Claire brought the compass. The shareholder meeting began at 9, in the 42nd floor conference room. 31 shareholders. Strand seated directly across from Sloane at the long table. Reed was not in the room. He was in the east fire stairwell between the 36th and 37th floors, listening through an earpiece to the building's internal channels. 4 men had entered the 38th floor at 9:12 through the service elevator, using maintenance badges that had not been checked out through the standard system. Reed moved up the stairwell. He had chosen east because he knew Strand's team would use west viewer cameras, older door sensors, cleaner line to the server room. Every architectural decision in the building had a shadow, and he had spent the previous week mapping the shadows. 4 men on the 38th floor, professional, unhurried, walking toward the server room with the confidence of people who had been told the floor would be empty. The floor was not empty. This was not a long fight. Long fights happened when there was uncertainty about the outcome. Reed had spent 7 years learning to remove uncertainty as quickly as possible, and he applied that knowledge now with a focused economy that left no room for performance or hesitation. The first man, silent choke from behind, unconscious in 7 seconds, placed in the recovery position out of the walking path. The second heard something, turned, and Reed was already at his side wrist lock, tactical knife, disarmed, pressure point at the base of the neck. Dropped. The third came from the left. Reed had predicted the angle from the moment he identified the formation. The fourth, the largest, lasted 11 seconds. Hunter Voss appeared from the east corridor with a firearm. "I need 15 minutes. Stand down and nobody gets hurt," Reed said. "I do not have 15 minutes. His left shoulder had taken a round from the 4th man moments earlier, shallow, no structural damage. He filed it and moved on. But Hunter did not fire. He stood there, muzzle pointed at the floor. "Callahan, listen to me." His voice had changed. "Strand has my ex-wife. 18 months. He said he would release her if I finished the job today. But your daughter, he marked her too. There is a second team on its way to Lake Oswego right now. I only just found out, 5 minutes ago." Reed stayed still for 2 seconds, assessing. Hunter was not performing. His eyes did not lie like that. "What do you want?" "I give you the server room access code to prove I have turned. You go get your daughter. I stand here and buy time until the police arrive," Reed said. "Where is your ex-wife?" Hunter handed him a slip of paper. Reed read it once. "I will send people. Give me the code." Reed called Maddie. "Get Claire out of Lake Oswego. Now, take Boone's Ferry, not 43. I am sending a car to meet you at Cruze Way. Do not stop until Ranganathan calls you back." Then he pinged Sloane. "One signal." She read it. She was in the shareholder meeting. 42nd floor conference room. Sloane received the signal through Madison's earpiece relay. 60 seconds passed. She let Strand finish the sentence he was on. "This session will need to be postponed," she said. The reasons will be explained by law enforcement within the next few minutes. She let a beat pass. Then she looked at Strand with the direct focus of someone who had finished being diplomatic. Section 9 will also be contested under Clause 22B, which provides for nullification in cases of documented partner fraud. I have the documentation. I have been building the file for 8 days, Carver. Strand sat very still. Portland police and FBI walked into the conference room at 9:31. Strand was led out. On his way past Sloan, he looked at her. "Your father would be disappointed," Sloan said. "No, he prepared for this day. You are the one who is disappointed." Lake Oswego. Maddie was driving. Claire was in the back seat, holding the compass in both hands. They were on Boone's Ferry, exactly as Reed had instructed. 4 minutes from the house, Maddie saw a black SUV in her rear-view mirror, staying close. Maddie did not panic. She had worked for Everett Whitaker for 23 years, a man who had taught her that composure was a moral act, especially when other people expected it to fail. She turned onto Lakeview Boulevard, where a Lake Oswego police cruiser, arranged in advance by Ranganathan through a senior contact in the district, was waiting in the parking lot of a supermarket. The SUV braked hard and pulled off. The 2 men inside were arrested within 90 seconds. Reed arrived at Providence Portland Medical Center not for himself. His shoulder was bleeding steadily through his blue shirt. He would deal with it later. He went directly to the emergency bay where Maddie had brought Claire for evaluation. She was not hurt. Mild shock. She was sitting on the examination bed, holding the compass, both feet dangling an inch above the floor. When Reed walked in, Claire did not cry. She only reached out her hand. Reed sat down beside her and held her for a long time, longer than he had held her on any other day since 2023. Sloan arrived 20 minutes later from the shareholder meeting. She was still in her gray suit. She looked at Reed's shoulder, at the tear across his sleeve. "I am driving." Reed started to say something. She held up her keys. At the intake desk, she recited Reed's full name, date of birth, and insurance information from memory. She had reviewed every personnel file the weekend he was hired, a fact she had never mentioned to him. The intake nurse looked at her and then at Reed, and then back at her with a diplomatic absence of assumption. In the exam room, while they waited for the attending physician, Sloan took gauze from the supply shelf and began to work on the gash on his forearm. Without asking, he noticed, "You know how to do this." "No, but I learned quickly." Claire fell asleep on the long bench in the hallway, her head resting on Sloan's folded jacket, the compass still in her small hand. Reed sat on one side of her, Sloan on the other. The hallway light was an even yellow. Outside, Portland ran its ordinary frequencies, distant sirens, the low harmonic of traffic, the anonymous noise of a city that did not slow down for ordinary emergencies. Sloan said quietly. Claire added something to the drawing. Reed waited. "The one from last week. She came into the office Tuesday morning before I arrived. She added a tree in front of the house." Reed was quiet. He thought about Eleanor. He thought about Everett. He thought about the 11 minutes he had been late 3 years ago. He thought about the 4 hours and 7 minutes that had passed from the moment he left Astoria Veritas to the moment he held Claire in the exam room. He had come home on time this time. For the first time since 2023, the corner of Reed Callahan's mouth moved. Very small, very quiet. It was unmistakably a beginning. 6 weeks later, Portland had moved into winter steady rain, the cobblestones of Old Town glistening in the wet, the cedars along the Willamette dark with moisture. Carver Strand was indicted on 11 federal counts: money laundering, securities fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. The Eleanor Callahan case had been reopened. Her manuscript plus the new evidence was enough to cross the threshold. Contract fraud and witness intimidation. No bail. Estimated 28 to 35 years. Hunter Voss's ex-wife was recovered by the FBI from a property outside Vancouver, Washington, and placed in protective custody. Hunter, in exchange for full disclosure and for turning on the 38th floor, received a plea deal 6 years with the possibility of reduction. Section 9 was dissolved. Astoria Veritas posted Q4 results 14% above benchmark. The stock rose 23% in 2 weeks. The board signed Sloan to a new 5-year contract with expanded voting authority and a seat on the compensation committee. Reed did not take the head of security position at Astoria Veritas. He kept the watch shop on Northwest Davis Street. He accepted a part-time advisory role one morning a week at a rate that preserved Claire's insurance in full. Sloan did not argue. She understood. Claire switched her therapy program a new clinician at OHSU Dornbecker, an 8-minute walk from the watch shop. Claire was sleeping better. She still drew diagrams, but the week before she had drawn something different. A tree, with leaves in 2 colors. Maddie Orsini was promoted to chief of staff. She cried when Sloan told her the first time Sloan had ever seen her cry in 23 years. A Saturday afternoon in December, Reed, Claire, and Sloan walked in Forest Park, on the Wildwood Trail. Moss covered the stones. Mist drifted through the high canopy of Douglas firs. Claire ran ahead with the compass no longer something to hold, now something to lead with. Reed and Sloan walked behind. Reed had his hands in his coat pockets. Sloan was not wearing gloves. Her fingers were cold. Sloan said, "My father knew." Reed looked at her. He knew that one day I would need someone who would never see me as a CEO, and he knew you were the man who would never see anyone as a CEO, because you could not look at any person without seeing the person first. Reed did not answer right away. After a moment, Eleanor carved those 3 letters onto the compass because she trusted Everett. She trusted an old man she had met once. I did not understand what she was trusting. I understand now. Claire turned back on the trail and waved. "Dad. Miss Sloan. There is a squirrel." Reed took his hand out of his coat pocket. Sloan, very naturally, placed her cold fingers into the warm palm of his hand. Neither of them said anything. They kept walking. In the 42 seconds in the lobby of Astoria Veritas that November morning, nobody in the room, not even Reed Callahan himself, knew that what he had been protecting was not a $6,200 monthly bill for his daughter's therapy. He had been protecting a promise Eleanor had sent forward through a child, a compass, and an old man who had drunk tea for an hour and said nothing. 3 years before, he had been 11 minutes late. This time, on a wet trail in Forest Park, he had come home on time. And that, in the end, was the only way a man who had broken a promise to the dead could learn to keep one to the living.